Hey everyone, welcome back to more Charles Dickens, and this time no ghost stories. It is some of his earlier work called Sketches by Boz. It's a series of his observations on life at that time. Very amusing and very cutting as well. And let's read you one of them called The Dancing Academy. Of all the dancing academies that ever were established, there never was one more popular in its immediate vicinity than Signor Billsmeathy's of the King's Theatre. It was not in Spring Gardens, or Newman Street, or Vernon Street, or Gower Street, or Charlotte Street, or Percy Street, or any other of the numerous streets which have been devoted time out of mind to professional people, dispensaries, and boarding houses. It was not in the West End. It rather approximated to the eastern portion of London, being situated in the populous and improving neighbourhood of Gray's Inn Lane. It was not a dear academy, 4 and 6pence a quarter. It's decidedly cheap upon the whole. It was very select, the number of pupils being strictly limited to 75, and a quarter's payment in advance being rigidly exacted. There was public tuition and private tuition, an assembly room and a parlour. Now, Signor Billsmeathy's family were always thrown in with the parlour and included in parlour price. That is to say, a private pupil had Signor Billsmeathy's parlour to dance in, and Signor Billsmeathy's family to dance with. And when he had been sufficiently broken in the parlour, he began to run in couples in the assembly room. Such was the dancing academy of Signor Billsmeathy when Mr. Augustus Cooper of Fetter Lane first saw an unstamped advertisement walking leisurely down Holborn Hill, announcing to the world that Signor Billsmeathy of the King's Theatre intended opening for the season with a grand ball. Now, Mr. Augustus Cooper was in the oil and colour line, just of age, with a little money, and a little business, and a little mother who, having managed her husband and his business in his lifetime, took to managing her son and his business after his decease. And so, somehow or other, he had been cooped up in the little black back parlour behind the shop on weekdays, and in a little deal box without a lid, called by courtesy a pew, at Bethel Chapel on Sundays, and had been no more of the world than if he had been an infant all his days. Whereas young White, at the gasfitters over the way, 3 years younger than him, had been flaring away like a winkin, going to the theatre, supping at harmonic meetings, eating oysters by the barrel, drinking stout by the galleon, and even stopping out all night and coming home as cool in the morning as if nothing had happened. So Mr. Augustus Cooper made up his mind that he would not stand it any longer, and had that very morning expressed to his mother a firm determination to be blowed in the event of his not being instantly provided with a street door key. And he was walking down Holborn Hill, thinking about all these things and wondering how he could manage to get introduced into genteel society for the first time, when his eyes rested on Signor Billsmeathy's announcement, which it immediately struck him as just the very thing he wanted. For he should not only be able to select a genteel circle of acquaintance at once out of the 5 and 70 pupils at 4 and 6pence a quarter, but should qualify himself at the same time to go through a hornpipe in private society with perfect ease to himself and great delight to his friends. So he stopped the unstamped advertisement, an animated sandwich composed of a boy between 2 boards, and having procured a very small card with Signor's address indented thereon, walked straight out at once to the Signor's house, and very fast he walked too, for fear the list should be filled up and the 5 and 70 completed before he got there. The Signor was at home, and, what was still more gratifying, he was an Englishman. Such a nice man, and so polite. The list was not full, but it was a most extraordinary circumstance that there only just one vacancy was left, and even that one would have been filled up that very morning, only Signor Billsmethi was dissatisfied with the reference, and being very much afraid that the lady wasn't select, wouldn't take her. "And very much delighted I am, Mr. Cooper," said Signor Billsmethi, "that I did not take her. I assure you, Mr. Cooper, I don't say it to flatter you, for I know you're above it, and that I consider myself extremely fortunate in having a gentleman of your manners and appearance, sir." "I'm very glad of it too, sir," said Augustus Cooper. "And I hope we shall be better acquainted, sir," said Signor Billsmethi. "And I'm sure I hope we shall too, sir," responded Augustus Cooper. Just then the door opened, and in came a young lady with her hair curled in a crop all over her head and her shoes tied in sandals all over her ankles. "Don't run away, my dear," said Signor Billsmethi, for the young lady didn't know Mr. Cooper was there when she ran in, and was going to run out again in her modesty, all in confusion like. "Don't run away, my dear," said Signor Billsmethi. "This is Mr. Cooper of Fetter Lane. Mr. Cooper, my daughter, sir. Miss Billsmethi, sir, who I hope you will have the pleasure of dancing many a quadrille, minuet, gavotte, country dance, fandango, double hornpipe, and fair eggnog jingo with you, sir. She dances them all, sir, and so shall you, sir, before you're a quarter older, sir." And Signor Billsmethi slapped Mr. Augustus Cooper on the back, as if he had known him for a dozen years, so friendly, and Mr. Cooper bowed to the young lady, and the young lady curtsied to him, and Signor Billsmethi said they were as handsome a pair as ever he'd wished to see, upon which the young lady exclaimed, "Law, Pa," and blushed as red as Mr. Cooper himself. You might have thought they were both standing under a red lamp at a chemist's shop. And before Mr. Cooper went away, it was settled that he should join the family circle that very night, taking them just as they were, no ceremony nor nonsense of that kind, and learn his positions in order that he might lose no time and be able to come out at the forthcoming ball. Well, Mr. Augustus Cooper went away to one of the cheap shoemakers' shops in Holborn, where gentlemen's dress pumps are 7 and 6pence, and men's strong walking just nothing at all, and bought a pair of the regular 7 and 6penny long-quartered town-made, in which he astonished himself quite as much as his mother, and sallied forth to Signor Billsmethi's. There were 4 other private pupils in the parlour, 2 ladies and 2 gentlemen, such nice people, not a bit of pride about them. One of the ladies in particular, who was in training for a Columbine, was remarkably affable, and she and Mr. Billsmethi took such an interest in Mr. Augustus Cooper, and joked and smiled and looked so bewitching that he got quite at home and learnt his steps in no time. After the practising was over, Signor Billsmethi and Miss Billsmethi and Master Billsmethi and a young lady and the 2 ladies and the 2 gentlemen danced a quadrille. None of your slipping and sliding about, but regular warm work, flying into corners and diving among chairs and shooting out of the door, something like dancing. Signor Billsmethi in particular, notwithstanding his having a little fiddle to play all the time, was out on the landing every figure, and Master Billsmethi, when everybody else was breathless, danced a hornpipe with a cane in his hand and a cheesy plate on his head, to the unqualified admiration of the whole company. Then Signor Billsmethi insisted, as they were so happy, that they should all stay to supper, and proposed sending Master Billsmethi for the beer and spirits, whereupon the 2 gentlemen swore, strike a mulga, if they'd stand for that, and were just going to quarrel who should pay for it, when Mr. Augustus Cooper said he would, if they'd have the kindness to allow him, and they had the kindness to allow him, and Master Billsmethi brought the beer in a can and the rum in a quart pot. They had a regular night of it, and Miss Billsmethi squeezed Mr. Augustus Cooper's hand under the table, and Mr. Augustus Cooper returned the squeeze and returned home too at something to 6 o'clock in the morning, when he was put to bed by main force by the apprentice, after repeatedly expressing an uncontrollable desire to pitch his revered parent out of the second-floor window and to throttle the apprentice with his own neck-handkerchief. Weeks had worn on, and the 7 and 6penny town maids had nearly worn out when the night arrived for the grand dress ball, at which the whole of the 75 pupils were to meet together for the first time that season and to take out some portion of their respective 4 and 6pences in lamp oil and fiddlers. Mr. Augustus Cooper had ordered a new coat for the occasion, a 2-pound tenner from Turnstile. It was his first appearance in public, and after the grand Sicilian shawl dance by 14 young ladies in character, he was to open the quadrille department with Miss Billsmethi herself, with whom he had become quite intimate since his first introduction. It was a night. Everything was admirably arranged. The sandwich boy took the hats and bonnets and the street door. There was a turn-up bedstead in the back parlour in which Miss Billsmethi made tea and coffee for such of the gentlemen as close to pay for it, and such of the ladies as the gentlemen treated. Red port wine, negus, and lemonade were handed round at 18p a head, and in pursuance of a previous engagement with the public house at the corner of the street, an extra potboy was laid on for the occasion. In short, nothing should exceed the arrangements except the company. Such ladies, such pink silk stockings, such artificial flowers, such a number of cabs. No sooner had one cab set down a couple of ladies than another cab drove up and set down another couple of ladies, and they all knew, and not only one another, but the majority of the gentlemen into the bargain, which made it all as pleasant and lively as could be. Signor Billsmethi, in black tights with a large blue bow in his buttonhole, introduced the ladies to such of the gentlemen as were strangers, and the ladies talked away and laughed, they did. It was delightful to see them. As to the shawl dance, it was the most exciting thing that ever was beheld. There was such a whisking and a rustling and fanning and getting ladies into a tangle with artificial flowers, and then disentangling them again. And as to Mr. Augustus Cooper's share in the quadrille, he got through it admirably. He was missing from his partner now and then, certainly, and discovered on such occasions to be either dancing with laudable perseverance in another set or sliding about in perspective without any definite object. But generally speaking, they managed to shove him through the figure until he turned up in the right place. Be this as it may, when he had finished, a great many ladies and gentlemen came up and complimented him very much, and said they had never seen a beginner do anything like it before. And Mr. Augustus Cooper was perfectly satisfied with himself and everybody else who into the bargain, and stood considerable quantities of spirits and water, negus and compounds, for the use and behoof of 2 or 3 dozen very particular friends selected from the select circle of 75 pupils. Now, whether it was the strength of the compounds or the beauty of the ladies or what, it did so happen that Mr. Augustus Cooper encouraged rather than repelled the very flattering attention of a young lady in brown gauze over white calico who had appeared particularly struck with him from the first. And when the encouragements had been prolonged for some time, Miss Billsmethi betrayed her spite and jealousy thereat by calling the young lady in brown gauze a creature, which induced the young lady in brown gauze to retort in certain sentences containing a taunt founded on the payment of 4 and 6pence a quarter, which reference Mr. Augustus Cooper, being then and there in a state of considerable bewilderment, expressed his entire concurrence with. Miss Billsmethi, thus renounced forthwith, began screaming in the loudest key of her voice at the rate of 14 screams a minute, and being unsuccessful in an onslaught on the eyes and face first of the lady in gauze and then of Mr. Augustus Cooper, called distractedly on the other 73 pupils to furnish her with oxalic acid for her own private drinking, and the call not being honoured, made another rush at Mr. Cooper, and then had her staylace cut and was carried off to bed. Mr. Augustus Cooper, not being remarkable for quickness and apprehension, was at a loss to understand what all this meant, until Signor Billsmethi explained it in a most satisfactory manner, by stating to the pupils that Mr. Augustus Cooper had made and confirmed diverse promises of marriage to his daughter on diverse occasions, and had now basely deserted her, on which the indignation of the pupils became universal, and as several chivalrons gentlemen inquired rather pressingly of Mr. Augustus Cooper whether he required anything for his own use, or in other words, whether he wanted anything for himself, he deemed it prudent to make a precipitous retreat. And the upshot was of the matter that a lawyer's letter came next day, and an action was commenced next week, and that Mr. Augustus Cooper, after walking twice to the Serpentine for the purpose of drowning himself, and coming twice back without doing it, made a confidante of his mother, who compromised the matter with £20 from the till, which made £20 4s. 6 paid to Signor Billsmethi, exclusive of treat and pumps. And Mr. Augustus Cooper went back and lived with his mother, and there he lives to this day. And as he has lost his ambition for society and never goes into the world, he will never see this account of himself, and will never be any the wiser. There we go, quite very amusing. Obviously a setup there. Probably goes on all the time in that establishment. Hope you enjoyed that. Read some more of them soon. If you liked it, thumbs up, be lovely. If you didn't, well, sorry. See you soon. Stay safe. God bless. Bye-bye.